It's time to have the Real Convo, a show that brings hope and awareness to those affected by suicide and mental health. As someone who is affected by both, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention Southeast Florida board member Alan Mednick breaks the stigma with his mission that no one ever feels alone. With the help of influential guests in the community, the Real Convo starts now.
Hey everyone, it's Al Mednick, RealConvo again, coming back at you, and we have an incredible show today. Obviously, there's so much going on, and today, again, we have Miranda Khan that's going to be joining us as the co-host on it. And Miranda, we have a special guest today, right?
We do. Very special. In fact, you're going to realize how special it is when I pronounce the law firm. We have Freddy Perera, who happens to actually be my personal attorney, and he is with Perera Barnhart Allemande. And I want to make sure I say that right, Allemande, because it's a very fancy law firm. No, actually, you are super.
Wait a minute, I have to ask a question. Do you have to say it with the French accent?
I think so, right, Freddy? Right?
It doesn't count if you don't do that.
Right. Thank you. I pay him to say that, by the way. So you are very busy, unlike a lot of people that are scrambling, trying to find what to do with their time. You are extremely busy right now because you focus on employment when it comes to labor law and corporate law. So you are a very, very, very busy man right now. So thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us to answer some questions. You're going to help a lot of people. So thank you.
I can't think of a better cause, so I'm happy to be here.
So as you know, according to the Washington Post, 10 million unemployment claims were filed just in the month of March. And just last week, it was 6.6 million applied for unemployment. That's a biggie, but there's supposed to be some relief coming our way, and it's the expanded CARES Act. Can you explain to us what exactly that is and how it's going to help people?
Sure. And if I may, right before getting into that, I think it's important to put these numbers into perspective because it sounds like a whole lot, but I'm not sure people understand the magnitude of those numbers and how they're just shattering every record. And to put it into perspective, during the Great Recession, the most recent recession that we had, the most unemployment claims that were filed in any one month, and that was the record-breaking month, was 661,000. That's it. So these numbers are completely unheard of. And what we're seeing is, even though the Great Recession did sneak up on a whole lot of people, the fallout took some time. The people that were suffering from the Great Recession, the people that needed help, for the most part, were staggered over time. You had folks who, would lose their jobs, and then other folks who thought, I'm safe, I have nothing to worry about, and then they kind of get hit with a surprise, and then another month comes, and there's another wave. I say that because
ripple effect, right? But now you just had everything just shut down, almost.
Exactly.
Right.
The floodgates completely open. We were completely unprepared for this, and candidly, I don't think anyone could have anticipated it. So it's two things. One, the numbers are astronomical, and two, they're happening in such a short time period that the system just isn't designed to cope with it. So that's all I'll say with respect to the numbers.
So let me just ask you a quick question before we get into like the CARES Act. We have two parts of this. You have the people that are the workers that are losing their job. You have people, and then you have the businesses. So there's two separate parts of this. You hear a lot of people. I just spoke with someone today. They said they're getting furloughed. There are companies that are trying to figure out, is it better to keep paying their employees or better just to furlough them and let them collect unemployment? I hear other people where they're trying to get their workers back, like the landscaper, trying to get the employees back to work. The employees don't want to come back to work because they're making more money now on unemployment than they would if they're working. So I don't know what's true and what's not. Can you explain a little bit of the differences?
Yeah, and in order to do so, we actually have to rope in another law in here. So we have the CARES Act, but we also have the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which came before the CARES Act. And what that law did was it packaged two employment laws within it. One is called Emergency FMLA, and the other one is the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. You have to keep in mind when these laws were passed, and it seemed like it was yesterday. But for example, Emergency FMLA for it's the first time in this country's history that it's requiring paid leave. Mothers, for example, that have given birth usually rely on the typical FMLA, but all that did was it guaranteed you your job for 12 weeks, but without pay. So what Emergency FMLA did is 10 of those 12 weeks conceivably could be paid at 2/3 of an employee's rate of pay. Now, that law took effect 2 days ago on April 1st. And I've been telling folks, it's astounding to say this, but that law is already outdated. And here's why.
Okay.
The law was enacted at a time where schools were closing all throughout the country. However, businesses, for the most part, remained open. So what this law did, if you take a snapshot in time, it was trying to protect those folks who had children at home and couldn't go to work because they had no one to take care of these children. So in order to qualify for these benefits, you had to prove, or you still have to prove, two things. One, that you're unable to perform work either in person, so at the job site, or telework virtually, right? And then you have to prove that there's a child under the age of 18 that you have to take care of at home. It sounds great, but here's the reality, and these are the phone calls that we're getting on a daily basis, is it's no longer the issue that these workers have to take care of a child and can't report to work. It's that they don't have work. It's that the business is closed. The Department of Labor clarified on April 1st that if your workplace is shut down, or if you are furloughed because there's not enough work for you, this law just doesn't apply to you. So what was originally intended to have a pretty expansive scope has now been reduced to, a very, very narrow path. That's the emergency FMLA. Then you have to consider the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. And under that act, you could be entitled to up to 2 weeks of your compensation if, for example, you're experiencing symptoms associated with the coronavirus and are seeking a diagnosis, if you are subject to an order to quarantine or a doctor told you to quarantine. In those instances, you're going to get 100% of your compensation for up to 2 weeks. If you're taking care of someone that has, say, a child or a loved one that has the virus and subject to quarantine, you could get 2/3 of your compensation. But again, that law only applies if you can prove that your employer otherwise had work for you. So if they're shut down, if they furloughed you, you're not going to get.
So if I could ask you a question on that, can the employer put that against your sick pay or against your sick time or any personal time?
Yeah, so we're getting a lot of those questions. It all depends on the policy of the individual employer, which we encourage employees to look at what the policies say. Usually they're in a handbook. And for purposes, when you're, for example, furloughed and there's no work, many times you're going to be able to say, listen, well, I have 5 days, 7 days, 10 days accumulated, pay me for those days. And you in most instances, you're going to get paid. What some companies are doing, and the reality is it's largely not illegal, is because there's no income coming in, they're saying we're going to put a freeze on your ability to use your PTO benefits. You're not going to lose them, but when you're furloughed, you're not going to be able to tap into them. So it all depends on the individual employer and what their policies say and how they're reacting to this.
Let me ask you, is there a difference if you're considered a so-called essential worker? And I know that tends to vary state by state, but the federal government is just kind of giving an advisory, not really dictating what's considered an essential worker, kind of leaving it up to the states. Does that matter?
It does, but not in the context of whether you qualify for benefits. So, for example, let's assume that you have an order by a governmental entity, whether it's a county, whether it's a state, and it says, listen, the industry that you're in, you'd be considered an essential worker. But your employer has decided, we don't have enough business, so we're going to shut down. You're not entitled to the benefits of these two new laws that I just mentioned. The context where it is important is we're getting a lot of calls both from employers and employees saying, listen, I'm a little concerned about having to report to the workplace, and then I'm going to contract the virus potentially. Can I just say no? I don't want to go in? Or employers saying,
Amazon, that they had a strike not too long ago. Some of the workers there said,
or conversely.
Right. So what are you saying?
So the employers sometimes, what we're seeing is, this is a critical employee. We understand that they may be concerned about contracting the virus, but we needed to come in and work. I keep referring both employees and employers to the actual language in the relevant order. So for example, if you look at the Miami-Dade County order or the Broward County order, the likelihood of, for example, proving that you were negligent as an employer by requiring folks to come in and work is largely reduced if you have an order by a governmental entity saying you can remain open. That's kind of the cover. I think the analysis changes significantly if you work somewhere that shouldn't be opened and you're being forced to report to work. Now they're in violation of an order. And in that instance, it gives you the ability to offer more resistance.
So you just mentioned county by county. Does the county supersede the state, supersede the federal government, or is it the opposite way with these?
Yes. So I'll give you an example. Governor DeSantis recently issued the stay-at-home order, and in that order, you see a lot of consistency with what we've seen in South Florida in the orders, and the governor's order does say, to the extent there's a conflict, that the governor's order is going to supersede that. And however, and interestingly, the governor used Miami-Dade County's order as a model, saying, for example, for the definition of what an essential service is, take a look at what was done there. Now, what we do know is that the governor's office was involved in helping crafting the order along with Miami-Dade, so that doesn't surprise me as a practical matter.
Got it.
So let me ask you, because obviously the systems have been inundated. Now they're starting to actually mail out forms that you could file for unemployment, because these sites are crashing everywhere, not just in Florida, but all around the country, which again, I know you're based in Florida. What advice do you have for just, the average American out there that is worried that he or she may not have a job to go back to? What steps should that person take right now?
Listen, up to this point in this podcast, we've kind of
I know you've given us some, there's a lot of confusion with language, and it depends on county of this, but if you were just going to overall give us some advice, what would that be?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me tell you that I think there's reason for hope. If you're out there and you don't have a job, if you're out there, if you don't know where your next meal is coming from, I think there's reason for hope. And the reason for hope is based on two things. Number one, the most recent effort by the federal government to step in and provide additional unemployment compensation is completely unprecedented. Not only is it unprecedented, but the amount that is being offered is more than twice than you could have ever qualified in most states throughout the country, even if you got the maximum benefit that was offered. So, for example, Florida. And Florida has one of the lowest unemployment compensation rates in the entire country. But the max...
Hey, you with sunshine, right, Alan?
You got it.
So, and not only that, Florida has traditionally had among the lowest percentage of folks who qualify for the benefit. So if you're lucky enough to qualify for the benefit, you're going to get, really a small amount for the most part. But here's what we know. In Florida, for example, the maximum benefit that you could have qualified for is $275. The federal government has come out and said, listen, on top of that, we're going to give you $600. Which means that the maximum amount is now $875 a week. If you were to prorate that over the course of a year, you're talking roughly around $45,000. There's a whole lot of folks in this country, there's a whole lot of people unemployed right now that we're not going to make $45,000 even if they remain employed. And that's even accounting for overtime. So there's some level of help there that's being offered, and it's pretty significant for most folks.
Now, you said $875, and I kept seeing this number being thrown around that it was going to be $1,200 per person. Yeah, right, Alan? You saw that.
Yeah, I saw that too.
$500 per dependent, in other words, a child. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Again, as we start adding layers of hope, as people just sticking it out, that money that I just mentioned doesn't even include the $1,200. It doesn't include the $500 per child. That's if you're unemployed, right? The money that we'll be getting to most folks, if you're making under $75,000, is in addition to this. And it's not because you're unemployed. It's just a stimulus, like here's a check. It's $1,200, $500 per child. So a lot of people are going to now see this potentially a maximum of, in Florida, $875 a week. They go, to their bank account, assuming that they had direct deposit with the IRS, and now they see, potentially another, let's say, $2,500 because they have 2 children. So some hope is coming.
So here's a good thing about doing the show. I get to ask questions and hopefully I get some free advice. But anyway, just kidding there. But anyway, so I saw that it was $500 for children under 17. Now I have a 17-year-old child. He's not under 17. Is that just a gap in that coverage there, or? Yeah,
I mean, it's like everything. You have to draw a line somewhere, and there's always going to be someone on the outside of that line, on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, I told him he was born on December 31st. I yelled at him. He should have been born a couple months later.
Well, that was your fault. You took too long.
Yeah, I know. I do have another question, and it's a 2-part question. The second part, I don't know if you're going to be able to answer or not, but you're talking about benefits. You brought that word up. Now let's get into the health benefits. Obviously, if someone's furloughed, laid off, what happens with their health insurance? Second part of it is the other part of the benefits, which is 401ks and then, their retirement programs. Are they relaxing the laws at all, where maybe people could pull from their 401k to help them survive?
Yeah, so wonderful question. And there is a distinction actually between if you're laid off or you're furloughed with respect to medical benefits and other benefits. People need to realize, because folks are throwing out the term furlough, which hasn't been used in a very, very long time, and they don't understand what that means. All furlough means is that you are still employed by the company. You are an employee, you're on the payroll. You're just not getting any money because the employer says, I got no work for you. So you're going to be sitting on the sideline for some period of time. No employees out there who have been furloughed, you will likely be entitled to unemployment compensation benefits. A lot of people say, well, I still have a job, so I can't apply for unemployment. You know what? Traditionally, that's correct. But the rules have been relaxed. So in the instance where you've been furloughed because you're still an employee, the medical plan continues and the employer's obligations under those plans remain the same. If you're laid off, you are now completely off the books. You're no longer an employee. However, you're probably going to be getting what we call COBRA notices, giving you the opportunity to keep that medical insurance for some period of time. The problem with COBRA is the employee usually has to cover now 100% of it. It's just an option for you to stay on the plan, but the employer is not going to contribute anything to it. So that's the issue. And then the other question with respect to the 401k, we do know that the government has now allowed folks to take out a certain amount of money. I have to fact check me, but I believe it's around 100 grand, where you could take it penalty free for a certain period of time. So
and that's not a loan; that's straight. They can withdraw it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Great.
I have a question for you, just because, especially here in Florida, as you know, I'm obviously in the television production side of the world. A lot of people are freelance entrepreneurs. They work for themselves, or maybe someone was unemployed before the coronavirus hit. What happens to those individuals?
Okay. So we're seeing that a lot of the programs that are typically reserved for employees are now being extended to folks who have not benefited from those programs. Gig workers, for example, independent contractors, folks doing Uber driving, Uber Eats, things of that nature. Those folks are now being allowed to apply for unemployment benefits. We haven't fully gotten to the section yet, but they are now also allowed to potentially apply for some of the loans being offered under the CARES Act, and certain amount of those loans are subject to be forgiven. One of them in particular, I think, is among the best deal I've ever seen in business, which is you get 8 weeks essentially to cover your payroll from the federal government. And as long as you do that and don't have a certain amount of cuts to the employees or reduction in pay, you get to keep all of it for 8 weeks. We're talking for some businesses, hundreds of thousands, if not in the millions, of completely free money.
Okay.
So here's another question on that point. I have two friends I was talking to. One of them, basically on commissions, making a lot of money. Now the company decided to go, not to lay them off or furlough them, but just to pay them a salary instead of the commissions, but it's coming in at basically half of what they made or less. Mm-hmm. So obviously they're taking a big hit. I know other people that are being furloughed or laid off that may be going to doing the Uber Eats or something else to try and help them with their income. Is that hurting them? Or like the second part of it is that hurting him to take that extra job as far as unemployment goes? Is he not going to be able to get that now? And is there any compensation for the person that has to take less in money because of all of this?
Okay, so I'll answer both of them.
If that makes sense. Hopefully that made sense, the questions.
No problem.
No idea what that man just said. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
I know exactly what he meant.
It's okay. I'm just kidding.
So the individuals that are supplementing their income, now traditionally you're supposed to report that to unemployment, which that income ordinarily serves as an offset. And this is, in my opinion, unemployment can't deal with what they currently have. When it comes to administrating and offsetting and that kind of stuff, I just don't think we're going to see it.
10 million people.
Yeah, they just don't have the capacity to monitor it. But what we're seeing, for example, the unemployment has now waived the typical requirement that you have to actively be seeking work in order to get unemployment benefits. Part of it is, there aren't many jobs, but the other part of it is, imagine now the number of people that have filed for unemployment are sending waves of documents on a weekly basis to the unemployment office. So now it has to peruse all of these to see whether their efforts were sufficient to keep the benefits. That gives you, these are strange times. Unemployment is trying to keep it together with tape, spit, mud, whatever they can when it comes to, hawking what people are doing on it. I just don't think it's going to happen.
I would imagine they're working remotely too. They don't have a full staff at their offices.
Yeah.
I don't imagine. I don't know, 100% what they're doing. What I do know is that they are desperately looking to hire in the office, which which is great. But the problem is that now you have folks, many of which have never done this, getting piles and piles and piles of documents, trying to process them. It's not going to happen very quickly.
Yeah.
For folks who have been trying to get through, the one kind of trick that has consistently worked for a lot of the clients that I've tried to help is get up in odd times throughout the night. 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. Even if you have to do it one night, do it, because those people seem to be having success, because the system is just can't keep up with the traffic.
It's overloaded. I'd actually like to get over now to the business side, the small businesses. And
before you do that, I'm sorry to interrupt because I wanted clarification on something. So real quickly, if you were unemployed prior to this huge shutdown, do you still qualify for the same unemployment benefits?
that's a great question.
I just want to clarify that.
Yeah. So I would say it depends on why you became unemployed to begin with, right? So what we know is, if there was a separation, involuntary separation from the company, then you may have already been tapping into unemployment benefits. And then, although it is not clear guidance, I would then try to get the additional benefits that are now being offered by the federal government. I would say, for example, if before the coronavirus crisis, you just decided that you were going to voluntarily resign from your job, the likelihood of getting unemployment now is probably not very high.
So again, get into the small business aspect of this now. Obviously, there's a lot of different programs being put out there. I guess today starts the loan program where you try to get, even last night, I was talking to a friend of mine that is a banker, and he said probably around 8:30 last night, they changed the guidelines. The government changed some of the guidelines last night. Could you tell us a little bit about how, like, for instance, a restaurant that you can't go there to eat anymore, but now they're offering deliveries. Are they going to be able to participate in these programs?
Okay. So the CARES Act is one of the most complicated bundled legislations I've seen in a long time. So there are a whole lot of programs. But listen, I'm going to try to dissect it, as simply as possible, because I think we can.
And if anybody can do it, I know you can. So,
So, and this ties into when I said help is coming. I envision, and in fact, I predict that we're going to see a wave of rehires very, very, very soon. Yeah. Why? Because the best program out there is the small business loan program that's contained within the CARES Act, specifically called the Paycheck Protection Program. And under the Paycheck Protection Program, so long as the business is making representations about keeping employment where it is and restoring employment back to where it was prior to the massive layoffs caused by the coronavirus, they're going to get a boatload of free money. I've already this morning had numbers of calls with employers who are now thinking about and scrambling, contemplating how are we going to bring everyone back, and the deadline is by June 30th. So in order to qualify for this program, you have to be at a certain level in terms of payroll. So I think we're going to see a massive wave of rehiring of people back into the workforce before the end of June 30th. I mean, hopefully it's also because business has really picked up. But yeah. I think that the motivation will likely be qualifying for these conditions under the payroll protection program.
And we have about 8 minutes left on this. I want you to give your information if people need to get a hold of you, how you could help them.
Yeah, so you can look me up. My name is Freddy Perera at the law firm of Perera, Barnhart, Aleman. My email is Freddy, Freddy, at pba-law.com. That's PBA, like the Police Benevolent Association. Dashlaw.com. Our office number is 786-485-5232. 786-485-5232. And listen, I would say candidly, this has probably been the most rewarding time for me as a labor and employment lawyer, because for many, in many cases, we're helping keep businesses afloat, keep employees employed at a very desperate time in our country. And it's been a pleasure to at least contribute a small sliver to what I think is going to be an incredible recovery.
And you work, and I agree with that. I really think the recovery, I think a lot of business is going to open up. I think a lot of manufacturing is going to come back to this country as we see we need. So that's going to open up more opportunities. You work with both employees and employers?
That's correct. Which is not typical. Usually, historically, you don't really do both. I find that in our case, it really helps us represent either side, because it's tough to try to walk an employer through a decision where you don't know what makes employees go, what concerns they've had historically. You've never been in that room. So to me, I have counted it as a blessing to be able to do both sides. What
can you do? The advice you can give to either employees or employers, how to keep up with the new information? Is there a website to go to? Is there?
Yeah. So.
Freddy's.
Yeah. Well, obviously yours.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So yeah, we have been providing updates, but the best place to go for purposes of getting labor information is the Department of Labor. Usually it doesn't get updated very often. It's a pretty static website. Lately, it has been adjusting almost daily. Almost daily, you see they have frequently asked questions, and everyone was in the dark. And every day, I think they started with like 12 frequently asked questions. I think at this point we're like at 50 something. So they continue to come out with not only those, but brand new regulations that came out, for example, on April 1st. So I think that's the best resource to go to in terms of a governmental website.
Freddy, real quickly, I mean, I know you're based in Florida, but do you also represent clients and companies throughout the country, or do you just specifically focus on Florida?
So when it comes to counseling, for example, providing guidance with respect to federal laws and things of that nature is totally within our ability to do that. When it comes to actually appearing in court, there are rules that limit your ability to appear in court in foreign jurisdictions. But right now, that's not really what's happening. Is people are calling and they, I need guidance. What does the law say? What does the CARES Act say with respect to the numbers that we need to preserve in terms of employment? And that, you can really do anywhere in the country.
Freddy, thank you so much. You're a wealth of information, and you can tell, like, just by looking at him, look how passionate he is. He really is that in real life. He's like not just putting this on for TV because I know him. So
I do have to ask one question. I heard more of an accent in the beginning when we first started talking. Was that like a little put on? I'm joking. Anyway, I'm sorry?
The Allemande, I was expecting him to say that, but he didn't. He didn't hair back and say Allemande.
Yeah, again.
Next time.
I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. The people really need this information out there, both sides, employees and employers, and you're doing a great job. So thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Everyone out there, hang on. Help is coming.
Thanks.
And again, we just want to tell everybody that you matter. So hang in there. And like Freddy said, help is going to be coming soon. So take care. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Stop this recording.
Thanks.
And that's a Real Convo, bringing hope and awareness to those affected by suicide and mental health.